Yeah. We actually has been supporting Arbitrum since last year. Yeah,
Okay.
last year Q3, which is quite early. We made this decision because we have did a thorough research on all of the L2 solutions in the markets. So there are several aspects that we do care a lot. For example, the composability, and the second thing is the decentralization, and the third thing is about like the fee and their performance, whether it can fit our requirement as a derivative.
Hey guys, welcome to the CoinGecko podcast. For today's episode, we have Jin Miao, co-founder of MCDEX, a decentralized derivative exchange. If you're watching this on YouTube, we at CoinGecko really appreciate it if you hit the subscribe button below. So let's start the podcast, Jin. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks, Bobby. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I guess, Jin, before we kind of talk about MCDEX, right? I'm just curious to hear about your background. Where do you work before, and how do you ended up working for a crypto decentralized derivative exchange?
Yeah, for sure. Actually, before MCDEX, I have been doing startups in the industry of internet for about like 5 years. So I have my own business in the industry of internet. But I personally have been trading crypto like since 2015. But the word DeFi, this space is quite new. When I like met Liu Jie and the founder team, and back then like MCDEX is just an idea yet. So I start to learn more about like how what's the DeFi concept. And it's quite shocked to me because as you know, like internet industry is kind of already quite mature, and the DeFi is still like in a pretty early stage, which I think is like very rare in a world right now. So that's the most exciting thing that I think the DeFi space is. So, and then I joined the team and basically taking care of the operation and marketing side, and then start to take care of my MCDEX baby. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, like if you look at the internet space, like a lot of things that you think can be built has already been built. Like,
Yeah.
and then you look into crypto DeFi, it's so primitive. Like everything is kind of like arcane, like hasn't been built. But when you look at the potential of DeFi, like that's kind of where finance is going to go about. Like that's every single centralized financial services will be built in a decentralized manner. It's just a matter of time. So I think you guys you said it well.
Yeah, exactly. It's pretty rare because I've been looking for somewhere that is like in the early stage that has much opportunities for a long while, and then I found the DeFi.
That's great to hear. So for those of us who are not really familiar with MCDEX, can you maybe give a brief explanation of what it is?
Yeah, for sure. To put it simple, I think MCDEX is basically aimed to build a decentralized version of BitMEX, where anyone can buy or sell a certain asset without taking custody of it and with leverages. So yeah, so that is what MCDEX is trying to build right now, that people can get the price exposure of a certain asset with leverages. Yeah. And yeah, so I think that would be a simple version of it.
Are you guys already live, or when did you guys launch the first version? Can I go to MCDEX and start trading and buy a perpetual contract, for example?
Actually, we are right now waiting for our official V3 launch. And so right now we have been testing on the Arbitrum testnet for a couple of months. You can just feel free to go to mcdex.io to play with it. And for the official mainnet launch, we are expecting it like, I think it's in July or next month, pretty close. So yeah.
And you guys launched on Arbitrum, the V3 of MCDEX on Arbitrum. What's kind of new with V3, and what are the main differences with V2?
Right. Good question. So yeah, last year, in the middle of last year, we actually already launched our V2, which is like basically the first is inverse perpetual swaps in the space. And yeah, we have been doing a lot of changes in our V3. I think there are mainly two changes. The first change is that V3 is fully permissionless. That means like not only anyone can trade V3 permissionlessly, but also anyone can create any perpetual market permissionlessly. We think this is crucial because this is kind of shift the power of the creation of the perpetual market to the whole community, that we can involve the whole community to boost the MCDEX ecosystem together. And the second change I would like touch upon is about the capital efficiency, because back in V2 we still use the Uniswap V2 pricing formula, which is, everyone know that it's like low slippage, low capital efficiency. Since then we have been continuously upgrading our AMM pricing formula so that it could reach much higher capital efficiency. The general idea is actually similar to Uniswap V3, that we concentrate more liquidity around the index. So right now, like our V3, the capital efficiency is about like 1,000 times better than our V2, which means like the traders can enjoy lower slippage and the LP can enjoy more fee share. So so this is like will be the two biggest changes regarding the product iteration.
Do you guys use an actual AMM, or do you guys use a virtual AMM?
We do use a real AMM where we need LPs to provide, as I said, into the pool. Yes.
And when it comes to, you talk about concentrated liquidity and it's similar in nature to Uniswap V3. When it comes to MCDEX V3, do the liquidity providers need to specify the range at which they want to provide liquidity, or is kind of automatically determined by the AMM, but it's just sort of concentrated at where the trading happens?
Yeah, that's a good question. That is the difference between Uniswap V3 and our V3, that our LP don't need to choose the price range, that because the AMM algorithm already kind of decide that. So this is the one difference here.
Okay, cool. So when you participate, I mean, it's kind of hard because now it's all on testnet and it's not on mainnet. When it goes live, what are the markets that will be open? And I suppose anybody can create any market. Like if I want to trade like a shitcoin, I can just kind of provide liquidity, like two-sided liquidity into it and trade, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly, because it's fully permissionless. Anyone can do that. But what we are doing right now is that MCDEX DAO will also act as an operator, which is the creator of the perpetual market, that we will kind of have some role model pools and markets. For example, we will have like a USDC pool that can support ETH USDC trading pair and BTC USDC trading pair, such like this. And meanwhile, we have been in contact with several teams that have great interest to open their own token perpetual market. For example, the DPI team, they will have a DPI pool to have the DPI perpetual market. I believe there are many other like projects that have this kind of needs. So long tail market would be extremely boosting, I think.
And when it comes to liquidity providers, do they provide single-side liquidity, like just a token, or do they have to provide dual-sided liquidity, like kind of like what you see in Uniswap, like ETH USDC?
Only one asset is is enough. Yeah.
So that's kind of good, right? Because then I'm trying to think, do you suffer from impermanent loss if you provide liquidity on MCDEX?
Yeah. That's a good question, because the logic here is like AMM is acting as the counterparty of the traders. So the LP doesn't take the impermanent loss in our case. What they take is actually the market making risks. Yeah. So what the LP suffers is the market making risks and the market making profit. So our AMM algorithm is trying to balance their risks and profits.
So essentially what you're saying, that if a trader goes bankrupt, all the profits basically goes to the liquidity providers. But if the trader makes like a lot of money, the market makers suffer a loss because it's a zero-sum game, right? So is that kind of what it is?
Yeah. Basically like that, because derivative is a zero-sum game and in the mechanism right now that traders and AMMs are basically the counterparties. Yeah.
And is there a situation, I'm trying to imagine, where a trader makes so much money from a trade that the liquidity providers, the market makers, the counterparty for this other trade gets bankrupt instead?
Yeah, that's a pretty good question, because I can give you a case that I heard from my friend who is the founder of a centralized exchanges. He because he has been running a centralized exchanges for about like 3 years. He is a great supporter of our AMM model, because what he does when he runs the centralized exchanges is basically acts as the counterparty of their traders.
That's dangerous.
Yeah, and what they do, they don't use the AMM model, they still use the order book model, but what he does is like they are basically is being the market makers, and sometimes they may hedge, but sometimes they don't. So from his experiences in the past several years, usually if we act as the counterparty of the market, which means the traders, you usually will, profit from it, because for most of the time, the decision made by the most traders usually are false. So you're basically acting as a counterparty of the traders, all the traders. Usually in terms of probability, there's a great probability that you are making a profit.
Yep. So I guess the next question is, what's kind of the fees that is charged on MCDEX, and how do they compare against the centralized equivalent like BitMEX, for example, that you mentioned earlier?
So for a trader, like we are basically have two kinds of fees, the gas fee and the transaction fee for sure. So in terms of the gas fee, because what's been testing on the Arbitrum rollup for a while, we are kind of quite confident that the fee on L2 will be about like 1% of that on Ether mainnet, which is like $1 to $2 in MCDEX. Yeah. So, and this is the gas fee part. And the second part is about the transaction fee. And because the transaction fee is actually set by the creator of the perpetual market, it will be different. But for MCDEX DAO, as an operator, the fee is about like 0.0575%, which is quite similar. Yeah, it's quite similar to the centralized exchanges. So yeah, these are basically two parts.
So basically, it's kind of like Balancer, where the pool creator can sort of create and decide the fees. And in this case, like, can the pool creators, they put two tokens in there, or they kind of like follows the Balancer model to also allow you to add like 3 or 4 tokens, for example, or just single token, right? Is it?
Yeah, single token.
Single token, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, yeah. And I understand that on MCDEX that you guys allow for up to 20x leverage on trades, on perpetual trades, right? Is 20x kind of a theoretical maximum? Can you kind of go up higher to 125x, like on Binance futures, or like 100x on BitMEX, or what's kind of what's the kind of plan here?
Yeah. Because right now, like most centralized exchanges are providing like about 100x leverages. So yeah, actually for a DEX, the leverage is basically limited to the infrastructure. And so for now, like we on Arbitrum rollup, we actually could be a bit higher, but to be like more safer here. So we are trying to, our approach is that we're starting with about like 20x, and if we test for a while and everything is kind of stable, we may increase the leverage later. So yeah, generally speaking, if the TPS could be higher, then we could have higher leverages. So the general idea is like this. Yeah.
And coming back to the fees question again, you charge on average 0.075%. Like, what's the breakdown to the liquidity providers and to the MCDEX token holders, the treasury, for example?
Yeah, that's a good question. For example, for the 0.075% transaction fee, about like 0.015% will goes to the MCDEX DAO vault. And the vault is basically capturing a certain profit that generated by the MCDEX platform.
Yep.
And our holders, MCB holders, could have the decision to how to use the assets that generated by the platform.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So this is goes to the DAO vault part, and then the rest about like 0.05 around that figure will goes to the LP.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. And sometimes if the operator is not the MCDEX DAO, there may be some other project or other individuals, they are free to set an operator fee also, that they could take share of the transaction fee. Yeah, so basically the transaction fee will go to those three parts: LP, the MCDEX DAO, and the operator.
And say if you're an LP, I'm curious to hear, maybe I'm not so sure if you have any data from the V2, V1, or some of the testnet, like what sort of returns or APYs will you kind of expect to see if, for any of these pairs, you have any of these stats, for example?
Yeah. Honestly, that's a pretty hard question to answer.
We don't have any data,
yeah.
right?
But what we have right now is our testnet that we have been running since February. It's been like about 5 months here. And so we have been like, during this time, our API for the LP has been like kind of volatile, ranging from about APY from 100% to about like 20% in terms of APY, because it basically depending on the volume, and and also depending on the market volatility. There is a lot of like parameters that will affect.
Similar to SushiSwap, right? It's volatile. During like volatile days, like the APY goes up very high on those days because volumes go up.
Yeah.
Cool. What about liquidations? It's always an interesting topic, right? How do you handle liquidations? What happened to? Is there a penalty to traders who get liquidated? And where does the penalty goes to? Is that to an insurance fund like BitMEX, or to the DAO, for example? How does it work here?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So right now, like in MCDEX ecosystem, we do charge a liquidation penalty for the traders, and the penalty will generally basically goes to the LPs for now. But this could be changed by the governance, that maybe part of them will goes to insurance fund. But for now, in the mechanism, that most goes to the LP. Yeah.
And do you guys maintain any insurance fund, or it's not really necessary because the LPs are sort of the insurance unless they go completely broke, in which case the traders' profits are capped?
Yeah, insurance fund is also quite important for the whole trading ecosystem. So right now we are kind of have the operator be the one who try to be more to solve this problem. And meanwhile, we are also considering that those two, as I mentioned, that to use part of the liquidation penalty goes to the insurance fund also to take care of this asset, insurance fund. Yeah.
You guys chose to launch on Arbitrum. I'm curious to hear why Arbitrum instead of Optimism or instead of Polygon, which is already live. A lot of projects have gone onto Polygon.
Yeah. We actually has been supporting Arbitrum since last year. Last year Q3, which is quite early. At that time, like few people have heard of it yet. Yeah, because we made this decision because we have did a thorough research on all of the L2 solutions in the markets. So there are several aspects that we do care a lot. For example, the composability. And the second thing is the decentralization. And the third thing is about like the fee and their performance, whether it can fit our requirement as a derivative. And also we care a lot about whether they are developer friendly. For example, Arbitrum, we don't need to rewrite any one line of code, so which is pretty good. Yeah, so these are the several aspects that we care a lot about. So in terms of composability, I think which is one thing that we think is a top priority. So that leaves us some options like the optimistic rollup and ZK rollup. They're all composable, but for example, for other solutions, they are kind of cannot do that. Yeah, so we only have like OP and Arbitrum and ZK rollup. So we have kind of do some comparison of the OP and Arbitrum, because ZK rollup at that time is a little bit far away yet. So in terms of product readiness, we are kind of choosing between OP and Arbitrum.
What you say? LP?
OP, sorry, Optimism.
Oh,
yeah.
Optimism. Okay.
Yeah, usually call them
Yep.
OP.
Yep.
Yeah, and yeah, so after we did some comparison between the OP and Arbitrum, so we realized that, like, for example, the smart contract size on OP is a little bit smaller than the Ethereum mainnet. So as a protocol which is complicated like us, so we have to split our smart contract into several, which may increase the gas fee. So this is one thing that we consider, that Optimism might not fit us that much. And meanwhile, we have been studying the gas fee on the Optimism and Arbitrum. Like at that time, the result is like Arbitrum is still a little bit lower in terms of gas fee, which we think is important. But I believe that things might change now, because Optimism team is still working on it. So they have just announced something yesterday. So we are still doing this kind of research on the So back at that time, so because of these several reasons, we choose Arbitrum in the early stage. Yeah, so that's the thoughts here.
Yeah, it's always an interesting choice, and I always like to ask like teams why this solution instead of the other solution, because it's kind of a big mess, right? There's so many different solutions, and everyone claims that their solution is the best, and it's kind of leading to quite a fragmented DeFi space. But I think it's interesting to see how all this play out, and we get a better idea in the next few months.
Yes, correct, exactly. Things always change.
Yeah. So there are several decentralized derivatives platforms, and you guys are not the only one in the market. I spoke to Perpetual Protocol guys last week, for example, on the CoinGecko podcast. I'm just curious to hear from you. What's kind of the main difference between MCDEX V3 and Perpetual Protocol V2?
Yeah, I think they have announced it that like the V2 will also goes towards the permissionless path.
That's right.
Which is good. Yeah, which is good. I think this is how DEX will win over centralized changes. And I think product-wise, for now, I also have taken a look at their paper about the V2. I think one thing that I would touch about the product-wise differences about the LP part that you've mentioned, because they are leveraging the Uniswap V3, that the LP need to choose the range that they provide the liquidity. However, in our V3, the AMM algorithm kind of decided for the LP. So in this term, I think we don't have any comparison yet, but I think in this way, the AMM algorithm could probably make better decision when providing the liquidity, because the LPs, they may don't have like such knowledge to decide which price range is better or something. Yeah, so this is a minor the product differences here, but I think in the long term we need to iterate a lot, because this is still in the initial stage. This is not the end. This is only the start. We'll need to continuously innovate, to continuously generate some more new feature, maybe some new directions later. So it's a long-term run here. Yeah.
In your opinion, what are the key success factor or key factors to running a successful decentralized derivative protocol? What do traders in a centralized or decentralized platform look for? What do you need to do correctly to ensure success? And we'll be interested to hear from you.
Yeah, I think there are basically two key factors. The first one is user experiences, because most traders have get used to the centralized changes already, and if we made them to wait or too much cost to place a trade, it will not like attract many traders. So that's exactly what we are working on right now, to provide the user experiences that can on par with the centralized changes. And the second thing I think is also quite important, which is also something that centralized changes cannot do, is the ecosystem. because we need to fully take advantage of the DEX that we can interact with other smart contracts, so that the whole ecosystem is not only an exchange itself. Other smart contracts can build on top of us to generate much more diversified products. Yeah, for example, in MCDEX V3, we actually has two assets that is pretty good base asset for other smart contracts. The first one is the LP token, and the second one is a perpetual position. Yeah, for example, we have been talking with Barnbridge, which is they are trenching the risk. So for our LP, as I mentioned, the LP suffers from both the market making risk and market making profit, which an average user, they cannot evaluate. They are hard to evaluate what is the market making risks and profit. So by collaboration with Barnbridge, so we can trench the risks of an LP, that if an LP is preferred lower risk, then they can go to maybe the senior tranche. And if they are preferred higher risk, they can go to the junior tranche. This kind of composability can widen the participants of becoming an LP on MCDEX, and both it's basically another product here.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, there are lots of like interesting product can generated from those base assets. For example, our second assets is a perpetual position, and we are also working with some other project teams. For example, one thing that we have mentioned is the copy trading. So we can some copy trading product can build upon of MCDEX, so that they can provide these kind of services and products to wider users. Yeah, so there are lots of things that cannot be achieved by the centralized exchanges, and I think that we need to fully utilize the uniqueness and advantage of the DEX, so that we could gradually in the long term win over the centralized exchanges trading volume, which is pretty huge.
Yeah, I think you brought up some interesting points about how DeFi is composable and the centralized exchanges are not composable. So these things that you mentioned, like I didn't realize that like if you open up a perpetual position on MCDEX, that you get a token, and that can be used for a lot of things, even as collateral token. Actually, it might be interesting to be used. Is that an NFT or is that kind of ERC20 for any perpetual positions?
So for now, our LP token is an ERC20, and for the perpetual positions, we are trying to figure it out. We are hoping that it could be an ERC20, but I think we don't have like a tech solution yet. We're working on this path right now.
Cool. And do you think that DeFi derivative platforms will overtake centralized derivative platforms in terms of volume, like in the future?
Yeah, in the long term, I am 100% of that. Yeah, because I think because I am taking care of the operation side. I have been talking with lots of traders since day one, and that's a question I keep thinking about. Yeah, and think right now, like most traders has realized that in centralized exchanges, their real counterparty is the centralized exchange itself, instead of another individual. I realize that more and more traders have realized this part. So they want a fair game. So DEX is their choices.
I never knew the centralized derivative exchanges were the other counterparty for all these futures platforms. I always thought that it was some other market maker that was kind of independent, but I guess exchange could be a market maker itself. And
in a centralized exchanges mechanism, actually, centralized exchanges themselves is a counterparty, and more traders, because if there's a lot of like flash crash.
Yeah, it's just BitMEX is notorious for such things, like
this
scam
kind
wicks.
of thing. Yeah.
And talking about flash crash, like these things couldn't happen, wouldn't happen on MCDEX, or it's hard to happen, for example?
Yeah, so this is something that when we're designing the VMM algorithm, something that we are trying to avoid. So we have been testing in the real market market for like about 5 months. As you know, like in the past several months, the market is quite volatile, right? So during the volatility of the past several months, our AMM for now is working as our expectations. So yeah, so for now we are quite confident because we have been testing for several months. So we are kind of confident about the maturity of the work of the AMM. So yeah, we are quite confident about this part.
Sounds good. And for final question, right? I kind of asked a lot of questions today on MCDEX, and we've kind of gone through so many things. Kind of what's kind of exciting that's going to come about from MCDEX in the second half of this year?
Yeah. I think the biggest milestone could be the official launch of our V3 that was being like working for it for quite a long time. And besides the launch, we will like focus on, as I mentioned, to expand our ecosystem by collaborating with several other projects. And meanwhile, we are also considering to kick off our own incubator program, so that because we have many ideas that some products can build on top of us, but because we are only we don't have enough developers to implement those ideas. So we are also with the launch, we'll also kick off an incubator program so that we could work with more and more talents to implement our ideas to make it come true.
That sounds very interesting. Thank you very much for taking the time to explain everything about MCDEX to all of us here at CoinGecko Podcast, Jin.
Thank you, Bobby.
This podcast is provided as part of the overall information on cryptocurrency contained on our website, is for your general information only, and does not howsoever constitute any endorsement, financial or investment advice, nor any solicitation or offer of securities or other financial instruments. CoinGecko and the podcast presenter makes no warranties, implied or express, of any kind in relation to this podcast, including, without limitation, the accuracy and updatedness of its content. All opinions and recommendations there in the podcast are based on the personal opinion of the presenter. Please conduct your own research and procure professional advice should you, at your own risk, decide to howsoever invest or trade in relation to the content contained in the podcast.
For the latest crypto prices, visit our website. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to keep up to date on the latest crypto trends.